This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, our weekend show is very different to the weekday shows. The weekend's all about the two of us each nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, and our favourite story. And obviously it is a competition because we are very competitive people, and we don't compete through the week. We save it all for the weekend, so it all just kind of spews out on the weekend, and we need an adjudicator to wade through all of that and decide a winner. And that adjudicator is our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, last week I voiced a few little concerns, complaints. And I was questioning some of the categories and whether we should keep them. Look, I forget the details because they're not important. But what is important is what it sparked from Joseph, a listener who got in contact via Instagram. Follow us on Instagram, Fear and Greed Podcast. And he said, "Hey guys, have an idea for categories for the weekend edition. Listened to the weekend's episode and it got me thinking." So clearly I have inspired Joseph.
You alone have inspired Joseph.
You're a better man for knowing or having listened to Michael, Joseph.
Yep, this is true. He says, "Can you perhaps create the biggest story that isn't the Australian economy? Because every week the biggest story is the Oz economy. And then if you decide on the biggest economic story and then just pick a different biggest story of the week, and that will be the biggest story." And you know what? I think Joseph could be onto something. And I wrote back to him and said, "Look, I will kind of float this. I reckon you're onto something. Wish me luck for victory this weekend." And you know what Joseph said back?
What?
He said, "You are the man of the people. You don't need luck. You have us."
I like Joseph.
Oh, Joseph. I mean, a fantastic response, but you know what this does to Michael's ego? It just gets worse and bigger and bigger. Watch out. He's about to fall off his ego. Ooh.
So, shall we agree then, Sean? Shall we agree between us?
Right.
And Adam, obviously, as well, that the biggest story this week was the economy?
Yes.
The Reserve Bank?
So you and I would both say that, Michael. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's very, very, very unclear, though, whether Adam would say that because his rulings are pretty arbitrary.
All right. So we'll agree that the Reserve Bank Board leaving interest rates on hold, everyone kind of watching to see what they do, and they left it at 4.1% for now. That's the biggest story. All right. All agreed?
Deal. Done.
Yep. I'm okay with that.
Perfect. Let's find the next.
1-0 to me.
Sean says 1-0 to me.
Well, I would have done it.
Oh, of course you would have done it because you get in first every week. Okay, let's go to the biggest story. What was it for you? The second biggest story, really.
Yes. Well, Michael, it was a very big week for markets. We had the end of the fiscal year. The local equity market ended 2023 up 8 or 9%. That's pretty good. Much better than a year earlier. All of us with superannuation funds benefit from the rise in equities. Aussie Super said its default My Super product, which is a pretty good proxy for a balanced super fund, returned 8.22%. Australian Retirement Trust, which is the number 2 super fund in the country, its balanced, or its My Super product, came in at about 10%. We've also had a bunch of property and super funds writing down the values of their commercial property portfolios by up to 10%. We know this is coming. I think Michael might have used this as a sleeper story 2 or 3 times so far this year. Anyway, It's happened. It's happened because it's the end of the financial year. The boss of Aussie Super, Mark Delaney, actually came out and said he's shifting out of retail and office property into industrial property. Mind you, he also said, "I'm not real fussed on equities at the moment. I'm going into the bond market." That suggests he thinks there's a downturn coming. It's sort of ironic we've had such a good year when interest rates rose to fight rising inflation. Just shows how forward-looking equity markets are. And AMP Shane Oliver this week warned that he wouldn't be surprised if there's a blip in markets now. Mark Delaney shifting money out of Aussie Super. Equities suggests the same thing. So far this financial year, which is admittedly only 5 trading days old, the market is definitely down. Also this week, we had Apple hit the $3 trillion mark on Wall Street. We had the Fed come out and say that the decision to pause on rate hikes last week wasn't unanimous. That scared a few traders, and by the end of the week, equities were falling again. We had data out of China showing that the world's second largest economy isn't traveling that well. That put downward pressure on the big iron ore miners. Haven't mentioned interest rates or the economy there, Michael. Massive week for markets still, Adam, don't you think?
Oh, that was 6 stories in one.
Markets, Michael, markets.
Oh, end of financial year. Super. Commercial property, Apple, the Fed, China, 6 in one.
So you won't have more than one story coming up. Good.
Never.
Let's see how we go.
Look, for me this week, the biggest story, isn't it? It's quite remarkable to think that for a week when Parliament wasn't actually sitting, that federal politics still managed to deliver the biggest story.
I'm looking forward to see how many stories are in this.
Just one to begin with. Because, no, one headline, all right? Let's just go with that. There is one headline because this week featured a visit. And you know what? I'll just cut everything else out and just focus on this one story, because this week was headlined by a visit that has huge importance for Australia's economy and for our security. Indonesian President Joko Widodo was here. He met with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in Sydney. And didn't they cover some ground? There was a pledge of kind of $350 million from Australia to help Indonesia's green energy transition, a commitment to work together to develop electric vehicle industry, easing of visa requirements for Indonesian business people, and more. Just a little bit of a taste of kind of the things that were discussed and the actual tangible results that came out of this meeting. There was such a strong focus on trade and investment, with Widodo even meeting with a CEO forum here. This is all good news for the economy, considering this is a country very close to us, just to our north, with a population of kind of 280 million or so. Strengthening these ties, critical to Australia's growth, and important as well for our national security. The two countries declaring support for a region free from coercion. So look, that is a big story, and I'm not going to over egg it. You don't need to kind of put too much mayo on this, because that is just big on its own. If I was to add a little bit on, I would mention that on the domestic front, there are a couple of little bits and pieces. As we know, the voice debate has continued to get increasingly political. We had opposition leader Peter Dutton saying that the Prime Minister's obsession with the voice has distracted him from better managing the economy. He also got stuck into businesses like BHP and Rio, who are supporting the referendum. Anthony Albanese says the opposition leader is more interested in culture wars than the economy. It's all getting ugly, and we have a few more months of this to come. Then, just when you thought the week was done, on Friday, we had the bombshell report from the Robo-Debt Royal Commission. Now, this is really confronting, because you had Prime Minister Anthony Albanese holding a press conference where he described the scheme as a gross betrayal and a human tragedy. And it certainly is that, because the Commission heard that people took their lives over this scheme. And Prime Minister Albanese said that it unlawfully raised $1.76 billion in alleged debts from nearly 400,000 Australians. Now, Royal Commissioner Catherine Holmes said individuals have been referred for both civil and criminal prosecution to agencies including the Australian Public Service Commissioner, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, which has only been in place now for a week, the President of the Law Society, the ACT, and the AFP. The names of those referred have not been released. Now, of course, the Royal Commission heard from a lot of former ministers and bureaucrats, a lot of people involved in the scheme along the way. Even former Prime Ministers Scott Morrison and Malcolm Turnbull both gave evidence. This story has a long way to play out. It is a very, very big story. It's just a really big week in politics, considering Parliament wasn't actually sitting. And when you think about, though, going back to my first story with Joko Widodo, that is probably one that is going to have a big impact. But, Adam, I invite you to disregard that second story and disregard the third story as well, and just focus on the one, and just judge me fairly, please, as the biggest story of the week.
I too ask you to judge Michael fairly.
Okay, I find myself in unusual territory here, but so first the criteria: topicality, timeliness, economic impact, my subjective bias, and of course a little bit of melodrama thrown in. And across those 5 categories, I have to give this one to Michael. This is very unusual for me. I feel kind of odd doing it because it's rare that I think politics, to me, the stories in the category of politics outweigh those in business. But Sean, the market ending fiscal 23 up, that's great news for everybody. It is in the past. Commercial property write-downs, that's very much in the present and the future. I think that is critical. Apple hitting $1 trillion is symbolic. China slowing. I also think that there is a number of stories under there, the collective run of stories under the markets category. But following Modi's visit from India to Australia, Widodo and Albo, as you called it, Sean, their interactions, that visit this week is tremendously important. And I'd love to think that greater and deeper trade can come from it. The politics has to win for biggest story of the week for me.
Roe v. Wade.
Context for that one, please, Sean.
Once upon a time.
Years
ago.
When the draft ruling from the US Supreme Court came out on Roe v. Wade, I put that in as my sleeper story, and Adam just dismissed it out of hand. And in hindsight, it's kind of one of the great stories of the century. And so anytime I feel I've been done a dirty from Adam, all I need to say is Roe v. Wade. He knows what I mean.
I do. And I think it was about 3 months ago that I acknowledged I was wrong.
It took a while.
But it still did take a while. It took a while, and that still isn't enough.
Anyway, let's move on. Michael, how about you? So, sorry, 1-0. Sorry, I should allow you this moment of glory.
It doesn't happen often, does
Michael
it?
Thompson 1.
Starting in front, Thompson.
Sean Aylmer 2. No, 0. Sorry. Doing Joseph 1, the rest of us 0.
Yeah, no, this is all for Joseph and the rest of the people that I represent. Look, the most remarkable story for me this week, there was a little bit of action in M&A this week, and it was all to do with alcohol. So I think this is a pretty remarkable kind of story. And it immediately brought to mind that great quote from The Simpsons, which was, I believe, to alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems, which is identified as like the Simpsons chief writer, his favorite line from the entire series ever, which I just think is fantastic. So we're going to start with the big one. We're going to start with the big deal this week, United Malt Group agreeing to a $1.5 billion takeover from French malt giant Malterie Soufflé. Now, United, and Sean, I learnt this from you, not only that United is the fourth biggest, but that maltster is in fact a word, and I had to Google it. It's a real thing, apparently. It is one who makes malt.
It was a bit cryptic.
And so United supplies malt ingredients to beer, craft beer and whiskey companies, and presumably a smaller amount of malt to 1950s diners for use in milkshakes. This deal has been in the works since late last year. This week, the United board recommended the bid. Then we go to the other end of the scale. So that was a big deal. That's a big deal. And it's good. It's exciting. But let's just go down to the other end of the scale.
I'm trying to work out the remarkable part of this. Go on.
This one is a lot smaller, but I believe it is remarkable because of what it represents. An Australian business achieving the startup dream, growing and growing and growing, becoming a household name, and then being acquired for millions of dollars. Lion Group, which is owned by Japanese giant Kirin, is buying the 50% stake it doesn't already own in Four Pillars Gin for about $50 million. That's not bad for an Aussie company that only started 10 years ago. Can you believe that? Before 2013, there was no Four Pillars Gin. So Lion says that premium spirits are a source of future growth with beer sales under pressure. And Adam, I know how much you love a good Australian success story. And gin as well. And we've spoken to Four Pillars on the podcast before. Isn't this just remarkable? Sold in 25 markets, particularly big in duty-free stores, in airports and the like. The gin is very tasty. It is a great brand, very well known, now sold for an estimated total of around $90 million. It's just a remarkable story, and it shows the scale within M&A this week, and just a really good Australian company doing its best and winning at life. Remarkable.
See, normally I would have thought you struggle with the sleeper category more than the remarkable story category, but I'm not so sure this week.
Oh. Cheers, Sean. Please, why don't you amuse us with yours?
Well, my most remarkable story, I'm still trying to get my head around yours. So years ago, growing up in Orange, Dad watched the two Ronnies on a Friday night.
Okay.
Right before Dave Allen, just after Pot Black. Used to have the trots, the races at Harold Park would interrupt the feed on the ABC. Anyway, we'd watch the two Ronnies, and when I look back at the two Ronnies, probably wasn't anywhere near as funny as Dad thought it was. There was a segment called The Worm Has Turned. And when I think about Phil Lowe, I think about the worm turning. It's all about the sentiment is turning about Phil Lowe. It is amazing how many critics of the Reserve Bank governor now want his tenure extended. This week, opposition finance spokesperson Jane Hume threw her support behind Lowe. We've had business leaders coming out. The number of market economists coming out doing the same thing is quite remarkable. The gist seems to be that given the tough economic period we're heading into, no one is better qualified to run the central bank than Dr. Lowe. Notwithstanding his comments early last year about rates not rising until 2024, we all know what happened there. Now, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was asked directly about who would replace Lowe. He praised Department of Finance Secretary Jenny Wilkinson, Treasury Secretary Stephen Kennedy. They're obviously front runners. We'll find the decision in the next couple of weeks. But it is really remarkable how 12 months ago, the calls for Lowe's sacking were loud, very loud. In fact, 6 months ago, they were extremely loud. And today, people want him to stay. Don't think Jim Chalmers does, the Federal Treasurer, but I think everyone else does, and that's pretty remarkable. Adam.
So, Michael, the Four Pillars story is a remarkable one. My feeling, though...
Oh, dear. It's never a good sign when he starts with you, is it, Sean? Whenever he starts with you and he says, yeah, this was a good story. You're like, oh, crap. Okay, all right.
Remember, it's Adam's theory of saying three nice things before whacking you.
You spoke for a good amount of time. Your voice was nice and clear, and you used some words that you might have understood. However.
So, the Four Pillars gin story is a good one, but I feel like this is more or less an expected conclusion to it. So I don't feel like this is the remarkable part. I think the founding and the first part of the sale was absolutely remarkable, and good on them for finishing this sale to Lion Group. Congratulations. Sean, terrific storytelling, weaving the two Ronnies in. The worm has turned, and support for Philip Lowe, to me, is absolutely stunning. I think it's incredible because the baying for him to leave the role was enormous. So I think it's an incredible turnaround. So remarkable story of the week for me.
Well, the lesson learned, so it's 1-1. Well, lesson learned there for me is try and involve sort of 80s, 70s culture.
Speak to my age.
Go old and you'll be okay.
So, Sean, does that make that you a voice and me perhaps for the old people?
I think so.
I'm a voice for all. I don't differentiate, please. Don't try and steal my people, Adam. We will be back in a moment. We're going to find the sleeper story of the week, and it's currently 1-1. I like going into halftime with actually still having a hope of winning. We'll be back in a sec. All right, Sean, we are looking for the sleeper story of the week. So a sleeper story is perhaps a story that's not getting the attention that it deserves, or is maybe going to become a bigger story further down the track, or in my particular case this week, it's both of those. But I'll let you go first, Sean. What have you chosen for us?
Well, this week, Telstra said it signed an agreement to become the first telco globally to offer rural broadband and voice services with Elon Musk's satellite provider Starlink. The expected launch date is later this year. Vicky Brady, the boss of Telstra, said the offering will provide additional connectivity options for people and businesses where distance and terrain make it difficult to reach existing networks. What I think is interesting here is that, Michael, you're gasping there in the background. What's going on?
I am. I'm struggling to just pick my jaw up here. You are doing a space story, Sean. God, this makes me excited. Normally, I do all the space stories and the airline stories, and God, it makes me happy to see that you've taken my advice on board. I always say space wins every week, so you should do it. Now you're doing it.
You're conceding?
No. I'm just saying that if you win this, it's part my victory, is basically.
Right, okay.
So please go on.
Coming up. Okay, so Starlink's a low Earth orbit satellite system owned by Elon Musk's SpaceX. It was launched in Australia in 2021. Basically, low Earth orbit satellites deliver faster speed because they're closer, they've got less distance to travel than the geostationary satellites. The thing is, there were stories this week about the NBN thinking about launching its own low Earth orbit satellite. Analysts that were watching this deal with Telstra reckon that it won't just, they can say it's for rural and regional Australia, but it's actually a real option in terms of telecommunications more broadly. So telcos could go the way of low Earth orbit satellites. That totally changes the economics of telcos, which will eventually feed through to us consumers. It totally changes the competitive landscape if that's how it goes. It also puts an enormous amount of space junk out there, which, having learnt from my victory in that previous round, reminds me of some of my favourite lyrics from the great Billy Bragg song, New England. As Billy says, I saw 2 shooting stars last night. I wished on them, but they were only satellites. Is it wrong to wish on space hardware? I wish you'd care. Beautiful lines. And excellent question too. If I'm making a great wish on a star and it turns out to be a satellite, which is going to become more and more common, does it come true? Anyway, that for me is an incredible sleeper story, the development of these low Earth orbit satellite systems. Come on, Adam. Do I get points for Billy Bragg?
Well, might I hold my judgment? I am very impressed, though.
Yes, please. Yeah, thanks very much. That's all I wanted to hear. Okay, cool. Michael, up to you.
Look, it's a bit hard to follow a space story, especially when my story is actually a really serious one. This is really, really serious compared to Sean's. But anyway, Hong Kong has offered bounties worth almost $200,000 for information leading to the arrest of 8 pro-democracy activists. Now, the reason why this is so significant is that includes an Australian citizen, Kevin Yam, and former Hong Kong politician Ted Hui, who actually lives in Adelaide now. The reason why this is a sleeper story is because of what this actually means for the relationship with China. Our relationship, obviously, a lot of the focus to date has been on our economic relationship with our largest trading partner, including getting the tariffs lifted on $20 billion worth of goods. And the Albanese government has been making a huge amount of progress in normalising those relations with Beijing, including a visit by the Prime Minister to Beijing later this year. But these bounties have served as a reminder that while we might be focusing on the economy, a lot of the existing concerns around human rights haven't actually gone away. And we've now got China's foreign ministry calling for Australia to, quote, stop providing a safe haven for fugitives. And calls, would you believe, are now growing for the Prime Minister to actually withdraw from the trip to Beijing unless the bounties are lifted. So this debate now is just kicking into gear. How does Australia balance its economic relationship with China with our concerns over human rights and the oppression of free speech? So the relationship with China might be stabilising, but this week saw the biggest challenge to that in a long time. And with the pressure on the Prime Minister to pull out of his trip, it's going to be a rough diplomatic road ahead, one that has big economic and security consequences for Australia. So this is going to become a bigger story further down the track. We're going to be hearing a lot about this in coming weeks. So it is. I said it's a serious sleeper story. There's not much of a flourish because it is just so darn serious. Adam.
So darn serious. So, Michael, in Facebook, you know how you can choose your relationship status?
Yes.
Well, no, I don't. But go on, Adam. Go on. What's happening? We do know Lara's away at the moment, but let's just leave it there.
You could be married, in a relationship, or there is a category. It's complicated, and I think your story, Michael, about our relationship with China just shows how complicated it is. We've got this growing trade relationship. We are trying to balance, what was aggression and disharmony into a functioning relationship. And then this happens. It just seems so targeted. And I think that is entirely regrettable, but a massive sleeper story. Sean, I love your sleeper story, including the use of Billy Bragg, but also the idea of NBN might launch a service. And we saw this week Elon Musk feature yet again in the news for many reasons. But when he's got a brand name that's a bit questionable in terms of its popularity, and NBN taking on a satellite network that's under the control of our country, so geopolitics, popularity, I think the NBN taking on a satellite service for us that we can control, I think there's a lot of appeal in that. So that's a massive sleeper story. I have to give you a tie. Both excellent sleeper stories.
Doesn't this make the last round exciting? So what are we now? Is that 1.5 to 1.5?
Yeah. You are dead even, locked even as we go into favourite story of the week.
You know what I picture right now? I can see cars that are listening to this podcast pulling over to the side of the road because they cannot possibly drive on with this kind of suspense. They'll just go straight through a red light or something. So if I'm describing you right now, just sit tight while we wrap this up because this is going to be a cliffhanger. Sean, you go first for our favourite story of the week.
How can you go past Threads? Maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Please do leave it at that. I reckon I could beat that.
So Threads is the Meta's version of Twitter. It's up and running, and boss Mark Zuckerberg said there were 2 million signups in the first 2 hours, 5 million in the first 4 hours. It's actually hard to believe how powerful social media is. Like, in all of human history, has anything come closer than social media in terms of an ability to shift opinion or whatever? It's remarkable. The first post from Threads was from Mark Zuckerberg himself, the boss and founder of Meta. Let's do this. Welcome to Threads. I don't think that's inspiring, to be honest. It's pretty average. Yeah, that's all right.
He had a lot of time to come up with something.
Surely he could have done better than that. I mean, it's like Twitter. It's, short text posts users can like, repost, reply to. It doesn't have direct message capability. It does include links, photos, videos up to 5 minutes long. The fact that Threads is tied to Instagram, which is also owned by Meta, and has 2 billion users, should give Threads a pretty good head start. We've had plenty of Aussies join up. Anthony Albanese, Fear and Greed, we joined, definitely. The media was full of stories about Threads. It is a powerhouse within hours of its creation, which I just think is just an amazing kind of comment on society. And that's why it's my favourite story. Michael.
Yeah, good story. And
faint praise.
I was agreeing with you. Oh, goodness me. But really, there's no option but this story for the favourite of the week, the universal favourite story of the week. And it is Japan Airlines renting out clothes to travellers, all in the name of sustainability. And so basically you pay $80 or so and you can rent up to 8 outfits for as long as 2 weeks. And they come in 3 sizes. You've got small, medium or large. Never mind if someone takes an extra small. Just feel a little bit left out here. And you can pick the style. You can pick smart or smart casual and mixed, and the outfits will be delivered to your designated hotel. And I want to know whether you can specify that you just want shorts, no pants.
Oh, I like it.
Because, I mean, that's more sustainable, isn't it? There's less material. Anyway, that would be me. It's all about sustainable tourism. The clothes will be sourced from product overstock, so there'll be kind of minimal waste. And you know what this did? You know what this story did to me? It got me thinking about other great, remarkable innovations by airlines over the years. Ryanair is a great innovator, motivated largely by saving money. In about 2009, 2010, the airline voiced plans to remove 2 of the 3 bathrooms on its planes and fit in another 6 seats instead. And the best part was that the remaining toilet would then be a pay-per-use arrangement. €1 or £1 to use the toilet on short flights. And they actually came out and said, we are trying to change the psychology of flying. We are trying to get more people to use the toilet before or after their flight.
Oh, yeah, like they can control it.
Oh, that's a comment from an older person.
So it didn't work, and so I moved on to other innovations, including the Skyrider 2.0, which is a standing seat, kind of like a saddle. So if you picture it, you're upright, your feet are resting on this kind of foot plate, but you are pretty much vertical, and you're sitting on this like little kind of saddle-y kind of thing, and you're crammed in right up against the row in front and right next to the people on either side of you. Apparently it weighs 50% less than a standard economy seat, and airlines can fit in 20% more passengers. And what's not to love about standing up for 14 hours? And I'm asking that genuinely because, Adam, I suspect you would probably love it because you have been a long-term advocate of the standing desk. So surely you would like to stand up on a plane as well. Am I right?
I'd give it a go.
Of course you would. Of course you would. See, and this is the problem when Adam ends up in like focus groups for research because they somehow managed to find the one person in the entire universe that would go, yeah, you know what? I wouldn't mind standing up for 14 hours on a flight. Anyway, one more innovation that did actually get introduced, and it happened right here in Australia, and I thought it was a complete disaster. It was Jetstar in about 2003, 2004. Do you remember when they had no allocated seating?
Oh, yes.
It was this mad rush, this panic, the chaos, completely uncivilized.
And the tension in the lines.
Yeah, you were right. You're standing in the line, and as soon as the gate opened, there was just this scramble to get on a plane and try and get a seat next to the person that you were flying with. And so it was just chaos. And it didn't last for very long. I think they gave it a go for like a year or two, and they're like, this is ridiculous. Anyway, airline innovation. Japan Airlines, what a great idea. Let's see whether it works. I've taken you on a journey through some of the other great innovations of the last 20 or 30 years. I deserve the win, though I don't know if I'm going to get it.
So Threads launch and timing it around a weakness for Twitter, I think that's a magnificent business stroke. So they've probably really pursued this hard, seeing where Twitter is at, launched successfully, and you go, oh, well played. So that is my favourite story for the week. Michael, renting clothes, I think it's a great innovation idea of Japan Airlines. I'm just not immediately drawn to it. And so I'm not sure how that one's going to go.
I did like Michael's comment during the week. What about underwear? And it's a very good question. It's an excellent question.
Yeah, do we either take a bag full of your own undies?
Yeah, like your carry-on's got socks and undies and that's it.
That's all it's got. Or do you wear someone else's recycled underwear?
The third option, Michael,
Oh, yes.
None at all.
None at all. And that's why Japan will now henceforth be known as the commando state. All right, so where do we end up? 2.5 to 1.5. You know what? I think you deserve that, Sean. Well done. What was the score, Adam, when you break it all down for us?
Yeah, so Sean had another strong one at 94. Michael, you're still very good, 90 points.
It's not really that good, is it?
No, 90 out of 100. It's a cracking run. Both funny. Excellent sets of stories.
You know, what I love about this show is that I come into this show having absolutely no idea where we're going to end because Adam's judging is spectacularly
curious.
Curious, that's it. Curious.
Thank you.
I love that you got enough of the word inconsistent out there to plant that seed, but then you kind of changed course to curious. So well played, Sean. All right, good result. Well done. Overall, good judging. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Michael.
And thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson. Have a great weekend.